A single road in Russia is racking up a price tag higher than NASA's annual budget. Sounds wild? That's just the beginning. This isn't your typical highway. It's Putin's billion-dollar beast. So buckle up because this is no ordinary highway. Welcome to the Jubga-Sochi Highway, a project so big it's making headlines around the globe. Let's start by setting a scene, starting with Sochi, a sparkling coastal city nestled along Russia's Black Sea shoreline. It's summer. Tourists fill the beaches, music fills the air, and the cafes and resorts are alive with energy. But just beyond this postcard-perfect view is a problem locals and visitors have been dealing with for years. The roads. Getting to Sochi by car, especially from the town of Jubga, can feel like an endurance test. A journey that should take just a few hours can stretch into an exhausting all-day ordeal thanks to nightmarish traffic and dangerous road conditions. That's where the Jubga-Sochi Highway comes in. This ambitious infrastructure plan aims to cut through the Caucasus Mountains and deliver smoother, faster travel. But what makes it extraordinary isn't just its purpose, it's the staggering $80 billion price tag and the complicated story behind it. The highway is more than a road. It's a symbol of modern Russia's infrastructure ambitions and the political and economic forces that shape them. For years, the A147 highway has been the only major road connecting Jubga to Sochi. It's a winding, narrow, two-lane passageway that twists precariously through the rugged terrain of the western Caucasus Mountains. Sounds picturesque? It might be until you realize it's also a death trap during bad weather. This road is notorious for landslides, flooding, rockfalls, and traffic jams that stretch for kilometers. In heavy rain, mudslides often force the highway to shut down for days, stranding travelers and disrupting commerce. According to data from Russian transportation authorities, road closures in this region due to weather-related events have increased by nearly 40% over the past decade. And here's the thing, Sochi isn't just a city. It's a major tourism hub, drawing millions of visitors every year. Since hosting the 2014 Winter Olympics, Sochi has been aggressively promoted as a year-round destination. But the bottleneck created by the A147 is a massive hurdle to growth. Tour operators complain about lost revenue. Residents face hours-long delays just getting to work. And emergency services? They're constantly battling the clock on a dangerously unreliable road. Russia needed a new solution, one that could match the scale of the region's ambitions and its challenges. That's where the idea for a new highway took shape, a modern, multi-lane expressway that could handle growing traffic, improve safety, and transform the strategic corridor into a backbone of regional development. Now, here's where things get especially interesting. The man behind this colossal project is none other than Arkady Rotenberg, a name that's practically synonymous with Russian infrastructure and political power. Rotenberg is more than just a billionaire construction magnate. He's a judo sparring partner of Vladimir Putin and a trusted member of the president's inner circle. Over the years, his company Mostotrest has become the go-to contractor for some of Russia's biggest and most sensitive infrastructure endeavors. Remember the Crimean Bridge? That 19-kilometer megastructure linking mainland Russia to the Crimean Peninsula. That was Rotenberg's doing. And it wasn't just a feat of engineering, it was a geopolitical statement. The bridge cost about $3.7 billion and was completed under tight deadlines despite international sanctions and global scrutiny. So when it came time to select a builder for the Jubga-Sochi Highway, it surprised no one that Rotenberg's firm landed the contract. But this move raised eyebrows both inside and outside Russia. Critics pointed out the lack of open bidding and accused the government of favoring insiders. Transparency International and other watchdog organizations have repeatedly questioned the fairness of contract awards in Russia, and this case fit the pattern. Rotenberg's involvement is a classic example of what analysts call state capture, when private companies closely tied to government officials dominate public projects. And when billions are on the table, the stakes couldn't be higher. Constructing any highway is a challenge. But building one through the Caucasus Mountains? That's a whole different level of difficulty. These aren't just hills. This is an area defined by sharp elevation changes, soft geological layers, frequent earthquakes, and unstable soil. To make this road a reality, engineers had to design more than 40 bridges and tunnels, some of them cutting through particularly treacherous zones. The section between Tuops and Golovinka is considered the most dangerous and technically demanding. Steep inclines, loose rock formations, and deep valleys make it incredibly difficult to stabilize. To overcome this, crews are using cutting-edge techniques like New Austrian Tunneling Method, NATM, and specialized seismic reinforcement systems. This means they're not just digging tunnels, they're reinforcing them in real time based on how the rock behaves. On top of that, entire hillsides are being anchored using massive retaining walls and high-tension mesh to prevent landslides. Of course, all of this doesn't come cheap. Every meter of tunnel and every meter of bridge multiplies the cost. Experts say the mountainous terrain alone is responsible for as much as 70% of the project's total expenses. And then there's the issue of materials, much of which has to be imported or hauled in from distant regions due to the lack of local infrastructure. Even the most advanced engineering plans are often derailed by nature. And in this part of Russia, nature fights back hard. The promise of economic development often comes with a trade-off, and in the case of the Jubga-Sochi highway, that trade-off is the environment. The proposed route cuts through parts of the Western Caucasus, one of Russia's most biologically diverse and ecologically sensitive regions. Several environmental groups, including WWF Russia, have raised red flags about habitat destruction, soil erosion, and potential pollution of freshwater sources. Wildlife corridors that support lynx, bears, and endangered bird species are at risk of being permanently disrupted. Local communities have voiced concern about deforestation and changes to local water systems, especially in the wake of similar problems following the construction of Olympic facilities in Sochi back in 2014. Then there's the budget. When the project was first announced, it carried an estimated price tag of about $21 billion. But as of 2025, that number has ballooned to over $80 billion, a nearly 400% increase. And this is for a road that's expected to be toll-free, meaning taxpayers are footing the entire bill. Economic analysts in Russia have called the project a black hole for public funds, questioning how such a staggering sum is being allocated with so little public oversight. In a country where many regions still lack basic infrastructure, critics argue that the highway represents a skewed sense of national priorities. From the outset, public reaction to the Juba-Sochi highway has been a mixture of awe, frustration, and deep skepticism. Many Russians, particularly those in the affected regions, have voiced their concerns about how little transparency surrounds the project. The Russian government has offered few concrete details about exact costs, timelines, or how funds are being allocated, leading many to believe that the final budget may far exceed even the current $80 billion estimate. Critics argue that this lack of transparency creates fertile ground for corruption and mismanagement. Anti-corruption activists and independent media outlets have repeatedly questioned whether the inflated budget truly reflects construction costs or if some of that money is quietly enriching insiders. It doesn't help that the company managing the project, Mostotrest, is owned by a close friend of the president. This only fuels suspicions that the highway is less about public benefit and more about consolidating economic control in the hands of the few. Even the Russian Audit Chamber, an official government body responsible for monitoring state spending, has warned of irregularities in infrastructure budgeting. For ordinary Russians, it's hard not to wonder, why spend $80 billion on a single road when healthcare, education, and housing still need urgent attention? If the political controversies weren't enough, the environmental impact of the Juba-Sochi highway is another hot button issue. The road's proposed route passes through the Western Caucasus, one of the most ecologically rich and diverse regions in Europe. This area is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, home to endangered species like the Caucasian leopard, and filled with rare plants and delicate ecosystems that have existed for thousands of years. Environmentalists have warned that the construction could permanently damage these habitats. Entire forests are at risk of being cleared, natural water flows are being disrupted, and soil erosion is already being reported in nearby construction zones. Worse still, Once the highway is completed, the increased traffic could lead to pollution, levels that make recovery impossible. While Russian officials claim that they are implementing eco-friendly construction practices, independent watchdogs report that environmental standards are being bypassed in favor of speed and cost efficiency. Several protests have erupted in Krasnodar Krai and Sochi, led by both locals and national environmental groups. Despite this, construction continues. Let's look at the strategic importance of this road. Despite the mounting criticisms, the Kremlin insists the highway is essential not just for convenience, but for national strategy. The Black Sea coast particularly, Sochi is a major geopolitical asset for Russia. It's not only a key economic zone, but also a critical military area. Sochi, after all, houses official residences and naval facilities and played a central role during the 2014 Winter Olympics. Improved access to this region means faster troop mobility, streamlined logistics for goods, and greater integration of Russia's southern border. Analysts have pointed out that the project may be less about tourism and more about securing long-term strategic dominance over the region. In fact, the highway is often discussed alongside other high-investment infrastructure projects in Russia's south, such as expanded railways and port upgrades. These aren't random. They're part of a larger coordinated plan to ensure Russia's stronghold along the Black Sea remains impenetrable, even in the face of Western sanctions and regional instability. For the towns and villages dotted along the proposed highway route, the project has been a double-edged sword. On one hand, local economies have received an influx of workers and investment. Hotels, restaurants, and rental homes have seen a temporary spike in demand from construction crews and project staff. However, this short-term boost comes at a cost. Farmland has been expropriated, natural springs have been rerouted, and local roads are now congested with heavy machinery. Some families have been forced to relocate without what they believe to be fair compensation. Others are watching ancestral lands get cleared in the name of progress. There are also safety concerns. Tunnel boring in seismic zones and unregulated construction work have led to minor earthquakes and landslides. Residents worry that this progress may one day result in a disaster. Despite these setbacks, some locals remain hopeful. They see the highway as a future lifeline that will connect them to greater job opportunities, better hospitals, and faster trade routes. Whether this optimism proves justified remains to be seen. Globally, the Jubga-Sochi highway has received a fair share of attention, albeit quietly. Infrastructure experts are fascinated by the engineering ambition. 40 bridges, dozens of tunnels, and hundreds of kilometers carved through mountainous terrain. It's being compared to legendary roads like Italy's Autostrada A3 or even the US Interstate 70 through the Rockies. Yet, it's also become a textbook example of how massive infrastructure can intersect with authoritarian politics, national pride, and strategic ambition. Western analysts see the highway as yet another demonstration of Russia's willingness to invest heavily in domestic projects to weather international isolation. Countries like China, which also undertakes megaprojects in rugged terrains, are reportedly watching Russia's approach closely. Some have even sent delegations to study the roadwork, potentially looking for lessons or cautionary tales for their own domestic builds. So, where does this all lead? Can Russia realistically complete the highway by 2029 as promised? As of 2025, only a tiny fraction of the 170 kilometers has seen significant progress. The Adler bypass, the first 10 kilometers, is still under construction and has already faced delays due to flooding and logistical snags. Experts now predict that the full project may not be completed until well into the 2030s. Delays aren't just technical. Rising inflation, labor shortages, and international sanctions are driving up costs and limiting access to necessary technology and materials. Even specialized equipment like tunneling machines now takes longer to import or manufacture due to tightened trade restrictions. In short, the completion of the Jubga-Sochi highway remains uncertain. It's a race against time, cost, and complexity. And there you have it, the Jubga-Sochi highway, a monumental road carved through mountains, politics, and taxpayer pockets. While it promises faster commutes and economic growth, its staggering $80 billion price tag and political connections make it one of the most controversial infrastructure projects on Earth. Is it a symbol of progress or a monument to misplaced priorities? That's up to you to decide. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoy stories that dive beneath the surface of big global projects, make sure to like, share, and hit that subscribe button.